Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Core Productions here to talk about The X-Files, Season 1, Episode 12, titled Fire. The episode's description reads as follows. Mulder and Scully join forces with an inspector from Scotland Yard when the man with pyrokinetic powers stalks members of the British aristocracy. The episode was written by Chris Carter, and the episode was directed by Larry Shaw. This is his second and last stint on the series. The episode originally aired on December 17, 1993. Before going any further, I'll tell you a couple of things. One, this is not a sport-free podcast. If you haven't watched the episode, I highly recommend you go and check it out and then come back and give me a listen. Secondly, if you're listening on the platforms that this podcast is now available on, please follow and feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Corn Productions, where additional content can be discovered. If you're already on my YouTube channel, please like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to my channel. Alright, so this episode falls in okay bill for me. Not one of Carter's better writing efforts, though it was notable for giving us little glimmers into Mulder's past. And I'm not totally sure when all is said and done, what the villain's powers actually were. Was he able to control fire, or did he just have super healing powers and just rigged everything with fire for some reason? That ended up being his thing. This is one of those episodes that makes me regret committing to doing the entire first season, because I'm not sure that I have a lot of interesting things to say about this episode. And when I don't, generally I don't think these come out all that well. But nevertheless, I'm committed to doing this, so let's do it. The episode opens with an older rich couple strolling the grounds. They say hi to Bob, the groundskeeper, and as he's talking, the husband spontaneously catches fire while Bob smiles. And that's Bob, aka Cecil Lively, though we don't know that at this point. He is actually played by Morgan Shepherd. He has 63 credits for him, including Mantis, Sliders, a Star Trek Voyager episode as Ichev's father. After the credits, Mulder and Scully are leaving a court appearance, which they don't do very often, as hunting aliens rarely affords them the chance. The car is locked, unlocked, which freaks Mulder out, and there's a cassette tape, to which Mulder says, odds are, or 10 to 1, you can't dance to it. They play the tape, and it's a female voice talking about a prime minister being car bombed. And from her description, there's an increased tension that they are about to be blown up themselves. But this is an elaborate prank set up by Phoebe, one of Mulder's ex-girlfriends, when he was going to Oxford. She is played by Amanda Pays, 42 credits for her, including 5 on The Flash. Fun fact, according to IMDb, the character of Phoebe Green was originally intended to be a reoccurring role because Chris Carter admired actress Amanda Pays, and he liked working Sherlock Holmes references into the script. But the fan reaction to this rival to Scully proved so strong that this idea was swiftly dropped. And no kidding on that. The fans absolutely hated Phoebe. And I was, and am, no fan of hers either. Phoebe and Mulder kiss, and Scully looks jealous. Phoebe is introduced to Scully, and Phoebe correctly predicts that she hates her. Incidentally, this is Mulder's first on-screen kiss. Phoebe, in their office, is giving Mulder the rundown on the case. 3 dead members of Parliament setting his victims on fire, and not leaving any evidence behind. The suspect likes to send love letters to his victims' wives, and he sent one to Sir Malcolm Marsden's wife. Not that long ago, he was nearly caught up and killed in a fire in his garage. He narrowly escaped, and he's out with his family in Cape Cod until they find the suspect. The arsonist target, Lord Malcolm Marsden, is named for the show's hairstylist, and this is once again according to Internet Movie Database. Phoebe is here, as she puts it, because she thought he couldn't resist a 3-pipe problem. Mulder will send it to the arson specialist. Phoebe exits the scene, much to all of our relief, but unfortunately it's not going to be the last time that we see her. She says goodbye to Scully specifically, and all Scully does is give a little wave. Oh man, Scully really does not like this chick. It really is quite funny to me that we are doing a Mulder and Scully romance thing so early. I mean, basically, it's very clear that Scully is jealous here. What's interesting about that is that Chris Carter was in no way a shipper of Mulder and Scully, unlike the fandom itself. The other time that Phoebe says goodbye to her, she doesn't say anything. Mulder explains that the 3-pipe problem is a Sherlock Holmes reference, and good thing he explained that, because I had no idea either. According to the Conan Doyle collection, this is a quote taken from The Red-Headed League, one of 56 short stories written by Conan Doyle and which first appeared in the Strand magazine in August 1891 with illustrations by Sidney Paget. The full quote reads, "It is quite a three-pipe problem, and I beg that you won't speak to me for 50 minutes. And there was a Sherlock Holmes book called A Three-Pipe Problem, written by Julian Simons in 1975. He goes on to say that basically, when he was in school, he fell in love and she broke his heart. Scully says he just keeps unfolding like a flower, and Scully notes that Mulder was awfully quick to help Phoebe out. Oh, Scully, jealousy is an awfully amusing emotion on you. But Mulder says he's just talking to the arson specialist, and then he's done after that. Scully is, of course, skeptical. And so am I. After all, we still do have 40 minutes left of this episode. Phoebe and Mulder talk to the specialist, Agent Beatty, played by Duncan Fraser, and he has 119 credits, including The Crush, Time Cop, and 2 episodes of The Outer Limits. And Beatty is looking at this fire footage, and he seems a little too impressed by it, almost like he's getting turned on by fire. I mean, if that's your thing, I'm not going to judge you, but still. And apparently there was no incendiary device. He suggests an accelerant, but there was no trace of one. He thinks rocket fuel could potentially leave no trace. And he thinks Mulder has quite the case on his hands, and he wishes he could switch spots. You can almost see the wheels turning in his head. Basically, I think Mulder would like to switch spots as well. That way, he would no longer have to deal with Phoebe, and he would no longer be the guy, if we make this permanent, that chases after aliens and gets nearly killed every other week. And he wouldn't have a missing sister, or a soon-to-be-dead father, or any of the other traumas that Mulder has accrued throughout this series. The family arrives in Cape Cod. Bob is already there. He's a smoker and causes his cigarette to burn brighter. That's a bad habit, Bob. Of course, I tend to think that might be the least of his problems. Sir Malcolm Marsden is played by Dan Lett, 120 credits for him, including Nightmare Alley, Molly's Game, and The Shape of Water. Oh, and of course, the X-Men Apocalypse. His wife is played by Lori Patton. 37 credits for her, including an episode of Supernatural with Mark Shepard, also guest starring. Bob introduces himself and pretends to act all friendly and helpful. The rich couple stop to admire a painting, and they wonder if perhaps it looks like his wife. The kids, meanwhile, are playing outside. A dog is digging for something which turns out to be a body, and Bob kicks the dog away from it. This is the former groundskeeper, apparently. So on top of everything else that is wrong with this man, he's also abusive to dogs. What a monster. Mulder's letting Scully off the hook for the case because he doesn't want her to be involved in Phoebe's mind game. And here he admits to a fear of fire, because as a kid his friend's house burned down. And Phoebe, of course, knows of this. She shows up 10 years later, knowing she has control over him, and makes him metaphorically and literally walk through fire. Mulder goes on to say that Phoebe actually is fire. I'm not even really sure what that means, but okay, Mulder. Scully offers to help, but Mulder says sooner or later, a man needs to face his demons. In Cape Cod, the wife makes tea, while Bob creepily spies on her from outside. Bob encounters the driver with a bad cough. He offers to get him some cough syrup, and doesn't even take money for it. What a swell guy, that one. All evidence to the contrary, of course. He stops at a bar and flirts with a girl. This girl is played by Linda Boyd, who I know quite well as having been Maggie's mom in 14 episodes of Sullivan's Crossing. He does a trick involving making his fingers produce a flame for her cigarette. She's impressed, but then he lights the entire bar on fire. And well, this kind of scares her a little bit. I'm not even sure why he does this. What exactly is the point to this other than making yourself a possible suspect in your shenanigans that you're doing around this area? If you're a man who is setting members of parliament on fire and chasing after rich people and burning them up, perhaps you don't want to make a spectacle of yourself. But that's just me. Mulder and Phoebe talk to the girl who's in the hospital, and she doesn't want to cooperate because she lives with someone, and that person thinks that she was at school. Mulder says it's not a problem. Come down to the office, and you can work with a sketch artist, and your person has no need to know. He gives her a moment to think about it. Phoebe is impressed with Mulder's technique in blowing off her indiscretion so that she might cooperate. And Mulder says he learned it from dealing with her. Or more accurately, what he actually says is that he learned the technique from her. Of course, Phoebe takes this as a shot, and I would too. It pretty much is a shot. And she gets upset. Mulder apologizes, saying that Mulder thinks that they should focus on the case and not keep dredging up the past. But then she herself brings up the past, mentioning a naughty little encounter over Sir Conan Doyle's grave. And I hope that's really not the case. I hope that really didn't happen. But I guess it did. Mulder is now annoyed and says, like I said, we should focus on the case, because he really does not want to play this game with her. I don't blame you, Mulder, because this is a rather tedious game that I am kind of tired of watching already. Phoebe thinks that they're going to get a sketch of a guy who's likely burned to a crisp, and yeah, sure, Mulder says, but Mulder also points out that there's no body. Mulder goes back to the room, and the girl agrees to do his bidding. She also says he had an English accent. Bob encounters a driver who's not looking too good. He goes to the bathroom and suggests that perhaps it's the cough medicine, and we have a pan over to the medicine. And that's a bit on the nose for my taste. Scully is investigating back at the hospital and narrates her issue with the case and her profile. Bob, meanwhile, offers to show the kids a magic trick involving cigarettes, and you better hope these kids don't tell on you. Scully goes and talks to Beatty about the case and asks how the suspect could do what he's doing. She suggests a cream, and he thinks it's possible. Bob tempts the kids with cigarettes. One is tempted, but they are interrupted by their mother, and I gotta ask, how did she not see this? She tells him the driver is ill, and asks if he would like to take his place for an event later that day, and he readily agrees. Scully gets immigration data for some reason. We don't know what she's up to quite yet. Mulder explains his theory about who he thinks this guy is, and Phoebe is right on board, which Mulder is not used to. Mulder wants to set up a trap for the suspect, and she goes along with it. She also mentions that she got a hotel room for the night, presumably where the party is, and gives him the screw me eyes. Scully calls him, and he's very distracted. She wants to come up to give him info on the suspect. He says he anticipates having his hands full. Scully still comes, so I don't know. I don't think she takes this as a rejection. The family arrives to the party. They are watched by Bob. Mulder observes them entering, as well as Phoebe looking pretty good in her dress. At least she does from Mulder's perspective. I don't actually find her all that attractive. They end up dancing, and Scully ends up observing them, as she has arrived. She notices there's a fire alarm going off. It's on the 14th floor, where the kids are. Alright, so there's a fire in the building, and there's a blinking light indicating the fire, but there's no alarms going off. I mean, the alarm eventually sounds, but it should be going off right away if the building itself is detecting a fire. Mulder runs to the 14th floor. The kids are trapped. He becomes paralyzed with fear, and the firemen have to drag him out. Bob, meanwhile, gets to be the hero. He gets the kids out, and of course, he is likely the one that said it. Scully takes care of Mulder, who's unhappy with himself for panicking. Scully says that it could happen to anybody, but Mulder's like, well, it happened to me. Scully asks about the driver, and Phoebe enters as she does so, and she says that she checked out the driver, and he had no record. Phoebe ends up leaving. This time, Scully doesn't even pretend to say goodbye, and she tells Mulder, by the way, that she's actually going to be going back to Britain or whatever in a couple of days. Scully has been busy looking for an accelerant, and looking for similar grounds people who were there when the fires were set with the other victims. Only one crew had a person in common on their crew. This happened to be a man named Cecily Lively, but he ended up dying. And on top of that, there have been multiple Cecil Lively's, some of them spelled differently, that ended up with passports. A similarly named individual just got a passport in Boston 2 weeks ago. Mulder gives Scully directions. He wants a composite sketch from the sketch artist. Meanwhile, Mulder is going to go to Cape Cod, hoping to catch Phoebe before the suspect gets to them, and perhaps catch her in the act of potentially making out with somebody else, perhaps the father of the person that she is trying to protect. Mulder bursts through the doors of the Cape Cod residence and finds Phoebe in a compromising position. We don't actually see them kissing, but it definitely looks like she's making time with Mr. Marsden, and I'm pretty sure that's who this is, even though I had a hard time keeping track of who was who in this episode. She looks embarrassed, but Mulder doesn't so much as comment on the issue. I think at this point he kind of knows to just not give a crap. I mean, he should, but then again, men are not always the smartest when it comes to this kind of thing. He also has more urgent matters to address at this time. Marsden straight up just goes upstairs and leaves the scene. Meanwhile, Mulder tells Phoebe the name of the suspect and tells her she needs to get the family out of there. They prepare to do that, but Bob is watching. They're not exactly subtle here that they've caught on to the fact that there's a problem, and they probably should be because they know there is a suspect around who might be alerted to them acting panicky all of a sudden. He's gonna know, or at least suspect, that he's been compromised. Scully enters and comes to tell them the suspect is a driver, and Mulder's like, yeah, we know, he's missing. But when they look at the composite, the family recognizes him as the caretaker, not the driver. Mulder rushes upstairs and finds the missing driver, who looks unhealthy and dead, and I guess that cough was worse than we thought. And he definitely looks all burned up inside. Pretty literally. He looks pretty bad here. I'm surprised that they didn't manage to find this body before now. Like, they never ended up stumbling up into this bathroom at any point. There's not like a smell or anything like that. I guess maybe it's not been too long for there to be a smell, but still. Somebody would have discovered this body by now. This dude is straight up not having a good time, bro. Don't accept cough medicine from Bob. Or the moral of the story is don't be so lively in this case. The house starts catching fire. Mulder thinks the whole house is rigged. The family is sent outside, except for the children, who Mulder goes after. When asked if he's going to be okay, Mulder sarcastically says, "There is no place I would rather be." And you know what? I say that about my job all the time, practically in the same tone. He encounters Bob, who sets the place ablaze, with Mulder having to confront his fear. Bob tries to exit the house, but he encounters Scully, who's pointing a gun at him. And he says, "You're not going to fire that, because if you do, the whole house is going to go up in smoke." Phoebe ends up showing up to throw hot water in Bob's face. And you know what? I kind of feel like she's been doing that to me the entire episode. Mulder overcomes his fear and gets the kids out. Bob, meanwhile, has set himself on fire and seems to die. As he's on fire, he screams about how they are not going to catch him, but they very much do. I'm not sure exactly what the point of this, other than to experience massive amounts of pain, because being on fire is not a pleasant experience, unless part of his mutation is the fact that he does not experience any kind of pain. I really don't understand most of Bob's actions in this episode, but then again, that's probably a good thing because it means that I am not a raving psychotic lunatic. I guess maybe he's all burnt up about not getting the girl in this episode. Hey, that's something that you and Mulder have in common. After these gruesome events, Mulder sits in his office while Scully enters talking in a British accent, asking if he will take her to lunch. And this, of course, scares Mulder initially. And by the way, Scully, I don't know if you're serious about this, but I think you should buy him lunch. He's had a tough day. She ends up asking where Phoebe is, like she cares. Mulder says that he doesn't know, and she is surprised that she didn't call. Mulder, of course, is not. She didn't, in fact, call, but she left a cassette tape, and he doesn't want to listen to it. Scully is confused as to why not. Isn't he a little curious? And Mulder replies, 10-1, you can't dance to it. And you know what, Mulder? You are a smarter man than I would be in your situation, that's for sure. It is certainly better off that you and I never see Phoebe again. Scully narrates the end of the case. Bob is still somehow alive and rapidly healing, and I guess that's his power. We see Bob in a hyperbaric chamber, and he asks a nurse for a light for his cigarette. Hey, you know what, Bob? I'm thinking maybe you should take this opportunity to quit smoking because it's clearly not doing you any favors. And that is where the episode ends. Oh, and by the way, he's listed as having 5th and 6th degree burns, which are actual classifications according to Internet Movie Database. The descriptions of burns beyond 3rd degree are not usually taught in health classes because the prognosis is almost certainly fatal. And that's according to Internet Movie Database once again. Yep, so, yeah, it was an okay episode. Not particularly great, not bad. There's not really much to say about it. Some mild criticisms here and there. Next week we got, or not next week, but whenever it is I get around to recording it, which I hope will be by next week, Beyond the Sea, which is a bona fide classic episode for Season 1. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can buy something from the Core Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as myself. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to my channel. This is Dave from Core Productions, signing off.